I have been up since about 3 in the morning my time, um, because I was just so excited. Yeah, it's hard to sleep when you're excited, right? So your mind races. John, welcome to
Yes,
24
yes.
Hours of UX.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here, and especially to be able to talk about this topic about the design myths that we all live under in the various roles that we have in UX and in large corporations and small corporations. So I'm really
Mhm.
happy to be here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are.
It's everything, isn't it?
It is, but it's amazing. I love it that we can connect with so many people throughout the world.
John, where does this find you? You're in Colorado right now?
I am in Colorado, yes, which is the Rocky Mountains, if you're not familiar with the United States in the center of the country. And yeah, I love the mountains. I love to hike in the mountains. It's one of the things that
Yeah.
I really enjoy the most. So let me share my presentation here. Can you
John,
see?
before you begin, let me just say that I was, go ahead and share your screen, but I was just last week in the West. It's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah,
If any of you have not been to the West of the United States, I highly recommend it. I was just standing on a trout stream last week in Boise, Idaho.
nothing better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing better than that. And I envy what you've done, John. And I wanted to invite you here to 24 Hours of UX for a number of reasons. Not just because you live in Colorado and it's beautiful and you have a wonderful view from your balcony, um, but because you've written about a very important topic that I feel viscerally as I work every day. And throughout my career, now perhaps my career is a little shorter than yours has been. Um, some of us are veterans and some of us are veterans. So, respect to you. I definitely believe in having a wide diversity on the 24 Hours of UX keynote track, because I think there's a lot to learn from young people, and I think there's a lot to learn from people who've been in the trenches for a long time. And just looking at your first slide here, I think everybody can appreciate where we've been. UX is not new. It's been around forever. The ISO standard is like years old, super old. Human-centered design is not new. It's just the names that are new. And I'm so glad and proud that finally we've come to a somewhat, okay, I realize there's a lot of name soup, but somewhat of an understanding of where the profession is. We have some, we have product designers, UX designers. Let's not get into all that, but the point is that, look, here we are. It's a beautiful thing. The world has gathered around UX for this event, but many others as well. And John has years of experience to share with you folks. And some of you are new to UX. And I think it's really important that you understand that UX is not just about pixel pushing. It's not just about research. It's not just about, the craft, basically. Mm-hmm. It's about also people and dealing with other people and working in an organization, company, an international organization like the United Nations, or a government organization, a military organization. All of us are involved in user-centered design in some way, shape, or form who are listening to this event right now. So I really wanted to invite John to come here today because he wrote a very important book. It caught my eye immediately, John, because I've been talking about the power of design for a long time, and I'm actually not a designer by training. I learned diplomacy as a student, and I feel actually that design is like the digital diplomacy of organizations. We really play this very pivotal role within organizations, and I felt it was important to bring you here today because I think you would be able to touch on that and share this role, this very transversal role that design plays within companies and larger systems. And so I'm going to leave the floor to you right now, but I think everybody should go and get John's book, read it, devour it, and we'll pick up the conversation when you're done. And hopefully you have some time for a Q&A at the end.
I will, Jesse. Thank you. And you can see my screen, I assume, my slides. Yeah. So a little bit about me, about my timeline in the field of user experience design. I started with HP in 1982, a long time ago, before the term user experience was widely used, and certainly before it was widely practiced. We had a few human factors professionals that had PhDs in cognitive psychology and such that would start to do usability testing on products, but they would never really got into the design world. They would say, this is what's wrong with the product. Somebody has to figure out how to make it right. I spent 20 years with HP in a variety of roles. I started actually as a technical writer there, became a manager of a technical writing team, moved on to a corporate engineering group that was called Design for the User. And our charter was to go out to all the different divisions at HP. And HP at that time was a mega corporation. They were all over the world in all kinds of different technology. And I would go out and I'd train and consult with these various divisions within HP on the principles and practice of user-centered design. After that, after I left HP, after 20 years, I tried to go out on my own. I created a little company called TCE Labs, Total Customer Experience Labs, and did a little bit of consulting there. I worked with some big companies, Microsoft. I got to speak at the Singapore conference there, and but it was the time of a recession, and I just could not make a go of it. So I went back into the corporate world, worked for General Electric in their digital imaging businesses, the MRIs, the CT scanners, the PET scanners, X-rays, and so on. Spent a little time there, then moved on to United Health Group, and I worked for a division of this insurance company called Ingenix, and they were responsible for all the technology aspects of healthcare, creating patient portals for people to come in and check on their health records, as well as submit claims for insurance and so on. Also, during this time, got a chance to work with Intuit. And for those of you outside the U.S., Intuit is primarily known for TurboTax, but they were also into healthcare and creating a healthcare portal. Learned a lot from them because they're one of the most user-centered cultures that I'd ever experienced. Went on to Deloitte, which is the large multinational professional services firm. Worked again for the internal IT department there, so we were responsible for designing all of the internal applications used by Deloitte accountants and consultants. Then went on to Admentum in 2012, my last job, really, if you look at it that way. Admentum is an education technology company. So we provided applications for students, for teachers, for administrators, and really enjoyed that job because, it's easy to have empathy for teachers and administrators and students. Maybe not as much for accountants, but anyway, I enjoyed that. 2020 left and moved back to Colorado and started my own little business here called Colorado Design Labs. And then this past January, I finished my book, Navigating the Politics of UX. Didn't know I was going to write this book, honestly. But when I went back and I looked over all of the experiences that I'd had over all of these different positions, I found that one of the most critical dimensions of being successful in user experience design is politics, mastering the politics, mastering the people. So that's going to be a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir in many cases. Jesse mentioned that there are some of you who are new to the field, and perhaps some of these things will be new to you as well. Others, more experienced people, you're going to say, yeah, I've always known that. I'm pretty passionate about this, and I don't want you to feel like I'm lecturing to you. What I'm trying to communicate in this 1 hour presentation is to give you the tools that you need to bring awareness to your colleagues, the people that you work with, the other people in your organization, that these myths exist and they're preventing you from really meeting the user's needs and understanding what the big unmet needs are and what the big pain points are that they're experiencing. Especially interested in your ability to influence and inspire development and product management because they are our key partners. Maybe these myths don't exist in your organization. Maybe they're all solved. I'd be interested in hearing about that, maybe in the Q&A session. Really love to keep my finger on the pulse of the UX community and understand what kind of political challenges everyone is facing. So I'm going to offer strategies for dispelling these myths. Many of these strategies apply to more than one myth. So hopefully this is going to help you get a few ideas about how you can start to change the culture in your organization. So the first myth, that your product has users. Users is a term that has been around really almost ever since I started working in technology back in the 1980s. And the reason it exists is because you don't have, oh, I shouldn't say you. Again, I'm preaching to the choir in some cases, but your company and the colleagues that you work with may not see your product the way your users do. They see it as a robust collection of functionality and features, and they see themselves as the leader in the market and a source of revenue. It's the focus of your professional life and their professional life. It's a beautiful thing. It's a subtle thing. It's elegant. It's your baby. It's your blood. And it's your sweat and tears. But to real people, in other words, users, your product's something very different. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. It's an enabler. Nothing more than that. While real people may admire your product for a short time, eventually that honeymoon period wears off and your product just becomes a means to get the results that they bought it for. So if they bought a state-of-the-art home theater system, that was great for a while, but eventually becomes a way to watch movies. If they bought a top-of-the-line laptop, it eventually becomes, oh, it's just a way to check my email and run my applications. If it's a high-tech washing machine, it just becomes a way to keep your clothes clean eventually. You don't even notice all the features in it. And then even if you buy a high-end car like a Lexus or a Mercedes or a BMW, eventually it's just a way to get to work. So why do we worry about the differences between real people and you? Because you don't see them. At least your colleagues don't see them. They have a blind spot for them. Instead, they see users. And to them, a user is a person who's totally focused, their identity is totally focused on their product, their relationship with your company. They strive to master your product and learn everything they can about it. They buy and read all the users' guides from cover to cover, and then they read them again. They start off as novice users, of course, but their ambition is to someday become power users or expert users, and they're going to commit all their time into achieving that goal. But there's only one problem with users. They don't exist. Or if they do, they're a very rare breed indeed. And it's not a population that's large enough to build a profitable business on. So great design, reliable functionality, and a computer feature set that are all important. But the most awesome and longest lasting attribute of a product is that it just works, that it delivers promised results. Now, I had an experience as a user experience recently when I was writing this book. I was working in Microsoft Word, and for some odd reason, all of my text started to be bottom aligned. So when I'd first start typing on a page, the text would appear at the bottom of the page and move its way up instead of what I wanted, which was to start at the top of the page and move its way down. Try to figure this out, right? So I started searching the UI for possible commands, and I found this align command, but I don't know if you can see it because Microsoft isn't real great on contrast for dark systems, but the align menu has a align top feature there, function, but it's grayed out. Can't use it. So what do? I searched the online help system, right? Tried to find help there. I couldn't find it. Eventually, I called support. I spent must have been 30 to 45 minutes online with them. They couldn't figure it out either. Eventually, I just had to uninstall and reinstall Microsoft Word to get it to fix, but the fix didn't take. It eventually came back. So my point is, for 2 hours, I was not a writer. I was a user. I was forced to be a user. I want to focus on the result that Word has promised me. That's being a writer. But instead, it forced me to focus on the technology in order to achieve those results that I wanted to achieve. The only the it's only you're only a user when you have to stop focusing on the result that you're trying to achieve and start focusing on how the technology works. So, a really successful product and what we should all strive for as user experience people is to make sure that customers don't even see the product as at least as little as possible and can focus on the results that we promised them. Because when you force people to become users, you're distracting them from the purpose of the product. And I thought maybe this user mindset, it doesn't exist anymore. We've had a user experience people around for a long time, so maybe we're beyond this now. But it still exists. I was watching one of the television channels here in the US Discovery Plus, and this message came up on the screen. Sorry, this device does not yet support DRM protected content. Error for 40,000. So I put this message out, and I said, I thought these cryptic user error messages were gone. I'm surprised that this even occurred. And a user experience person wrote me back and said, the message is pretty clear. The device doesn't support DRM content. If a person doesn't know what DRM means, he can Google it. Here, a user experience person was telling me, it's your job, user, to understand our terminology and our technology as opposed to the reverse, which the UX attitude should be making the technology understand the user. So how do you dispel this myth? Research. When you go out and you sit down next to a user doing field research, you see users as real people, not as users. These are people who are trying to get things done. And it should not just be you who's going out and doing this research. You should invite your colleagues to go too, your developers, your product managers, your support people, your marketing people. Really, every functional area in the entire organization should have the opportunity to go and see real users trying to use their products. This is how you find out what the results are they're trying to achieve and the struggles and the pain points that they're experiencing. The second way you can dispel this is by using personas. I've never been a real fan of personas as a design tool, but I am a fan of personas as a political tool. Okay. I hate the word user. I try not to use it, but it is a generic term, right? That it's the one that we have. But what you want to do is you want to replace this generic term user with the term that describes the people that you serve, the people that are using your products. So if you're working at General Electric in the digital imaging business, your user is an X-ray technician. So they're not a user now, they're an X-ray technician. If you're in Admentum, they're teachers, right? If you're working for Apple and in the music area, audiophiles are your users. If you're a user experience designer, well, that's who you are. You're not a user of Figma or something like that. You're a UX designer. If you're a CEO, that's who you are. If you're an IT manager, that's who you are. So as soon as you can, whenever you have a discussion with your product team, don't say user in that word in that meeting. Say teacher, say X-ray tech, say IT manager, say music lover, whatever it might be. So it sounds like a strange and subtle thing, but it reminds everybody these are real people and this is what they want from us. Okay, myth number 2. The user mindset leads to myth number 2. And the idea is that people are willing readers of manuals and will remember all of the great information and instruction you give them in training classes. I started out as a technical writer. I wrote this book called The Personal Computer Operating Manual for the 216, Model 216. I thought it was a thing of beauty. I thought that I was providing a real service to Hewlett Packard's users, because without this manual, there was no way they could be successful achieving the results that we had promised them. So I was also a trainer, and various times I tried training organizations on user experience theory and practice, but it didn't sink in. It was a fun thing for a few hours to go learn about user experience, but it really didn't change behaviors or attitudes. So we've got to find another way. Here's an HP printer from long ago, an HP 5P. This product is designed in such a way that manual reading is mandatory. Okay. You can see what the user interface is here, right? It's a 5 lights and 2 buttons, a blue button and an orange button. So one day I was using this printer and I was going to try to print something out, and this yellow light pops up on the printer, but my printout does not come out. So I said, well, it's yellow light. It's kind of near this orange button. I'm going to press that. Then I see a green light come out. Well, maybe I'm supposed to press this blue button then. It's kind of greenish. So let's try that and see if I get the result that I want. Then I get 2 green lights. Press the button again, and I get the test page for the printer. Not what I was expecting. Okay. But for some reason, the designers of this product and the product managers for this product and the developers of this product thought it was a perfectly reasonable expectation of their users that they understand light patterns, that light patterns on a printer is the perfect way to communicate to users what's going on with the printer. So what did they have to do? What did I have to do? I had to go to the appendix in the manual and look up which light pattern do I have here. And you can see there's all different kinds of light patterns, and there's an error message associated. And then only then would I be able to see what I should do in order to correct this error. Same thing happens with this watch. This is called the Ultimate Watch, believe it or not. I thought it was pretty cool back in the day. Had a little calculator on it. What I didn't know when I bought it, though, was that it came with this little instruction sheet. And on the instruction sheet, it told me how I needed to set the time. And it's a really complicated procedure. You press the AC button and you hold it for 3 seconds, and then something starts to flash, and then you release that button again. And then you have to press a button in group B. There's no indication what buttons are in group B. And then you press a button in group A. There's no indication what buttons are in group A. And then eventually, hopefully, you get the time set. Okay. But the result that I want with this is not to be a user. I don't want to know this technical procedure for setting the time. I just want to know what time it is. That's the result that I want. So how can we design our products so that you don't have to go through this procedure? You can actually just directly get the result that you're after. This all traces back to an attitude back in the 1980s when documentation was seen as a source of product strength and power, right? So Ken Olsen, who was the president of Digital Equipment Corporation back then, one of the largest computer companies back at that time, would say, oh yeah, with Unix, if you look for something, you can easily check that little manual and you're going to find that it's not there. But with VMS, our operating system, no matter what you look for, it's literally a 5-foot shelf of documentation. If you look long enough, and that's the operative word, it's there. That's the difference. The beauty of Unix is it's simple, and the beauty of VMS is that it's all there. Well, simplicity is what people want. If Ken Olsen had gone out and done observational research with his customers, he would have discovered what the real use of computer manuals are, which is to prop up the monitor of your computer to eye level. Training, similar. It's all about getting customers to be able to understand the procedures that they need to follow in order to get the results that they're after. One of my research visits for Admentum, the education technology company, had to deal with going out to a place in Texas and watching a teacher try to achieve results that she cared about. Okay. This customer had just received this training 1 week earlier. And she couldn't remember how to do it when she finally sat down and tried to actually get something done. As she said, it comes time a few days later to actually do it, and we're both like, it's gone. Okay. And that's what happens with training. A Yale University study found that 90% of the information delivered in a training session is lost after 1 week. So the problem with all sources of external content, whether it's training or documentation or support pages or online help, whatever it might be, is it turns attention away from the product where the customer wants to have their attention, trying to achieve the results that they're after, and then it forces them to become a user. So I wrote this article back in May of 1996 for the magazine for the technical communication community. And I started by this saying many, if not most, technical communication professionals waste their time providing services that no one wants or uses, except in rare cases, they provide little or no value to the organizations that employ them and fail in their efforts to communicate with the users of the products they support. Okay, I'm an English major. I was a technical writer. How could I write this heresy? You might think I'm dissing content designers and writers, but no, I'm not. I'm just saying the information needs to be provided in the right place at the right time and in the right medium so as to minimally divert attention from the result. When a person goes to a manual, they stop being a writer, in my case, or a nurse or an accountant or whatever it is they are, and they become a user. So you solve the problem because external communication, external content doesn't solve the problem. Training courses that are 2 days long and cover all the different ways that you can use a product don't solve the problem. What does solve the problem is to encourage your content designers and your writers, your UX writers, to think outside their job description. They've probably got a job description that says, oh, you're going to create this content here, and you're going to create an online help system or a PDF document, or you're going to, help write support documentation for customers or for the support organization. This limits them, right? It's like Maslow's old terminology or old saying if all you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look for a nail. Well, if all the content designers have are these typical responsibilities that are assigned to them, then that's what they're going to do. But what you want to do is still take their skills. They're very skilled people in communicating with technology and their expertise, and you want to unlock their value. So the way you do that is by adopting them basically into the UX effort, if not in the team directly, at least having a close partnership with them. We did this at Edmentum. We hired a really smart woman named Patty Villahar, and she created our in-product support team, which embedded all the information that used to be external into the product itself. And it provided it in a modality that the user could choose depending on how they wanted to learn. Maybe they wanted to read something. That's okay. We'll give them that. Maybe they want to watch it done first before they try it themselves. So we give them a little short video. Maybe they want to be guided through the process. So we have the ability to actually walk them through the procedure that they need to follow, the menu clicks and so on, to get the result that they're after. This turned out to be a much more humane way of delivering this information because, frankly, we're not going to ever design the perfect product that doesn't need information. We're going to have to find a different way to supply it. Okay, myth number 3, your product's features are used. Here we have Adobe, Photoshop, with a bunch of menus down, okay? And if you've ever conducted observational research and encountered a request from a user for a feature that exists, you know what I'm talking about. We used to run into this all the time. We'd go out, we'd watch customers using the product, and then they'd turn to us and say, you know what, this could be a lot easier if only you would do this, if you would provide this feature with the product. And then you turn to them and you say, well, you're right. And the feature does exist. You just didn't know where it was or how to use it. And then they're shocked and delighted because you've now given them an easier way to do something. But why is it that it's so hard to find those features? Because you're playing let's play find the feature. There's 169 UI objects in Photoshop in this image that you're looking at right here. And that's only a tip of the iceberg, right? We're only looking at one menu and a few dialogues and a couple of panels over on the right-hand side. So how in the world am I supposed to find the feature that I'm looking for? And by the way, I want the result Photoshop can give me, but I'm not an expert in photo manipulation and visual design and all this other stuff. So I may not understand what RGB colors are. I may not understand what CMYK is or why I would care about it, or what layers are, what channels are, what paths are, what is all this stuff. I just want to get the result that I'm after. So as a result, a lot of times we design features that are never used by customers, right? Again, going way back, kind of this is kind of a history lesson. You know, I worked for HP, I worked for the compiler group, Fortran, one of the earliest computer languages there were. And back at that time, it was a command line interface. So you can see this little kind of bluish box down there. And what a user would have to do in order to get the compiler to work exactly the way they wanted to was to type in a bunch of switches. So there was this minus sign and then a capital A, and there was a little A too, but you want the capital A and then a little R and a capital N and M and so on. And so this again required users, programmers, to go to the manual and scan this huge chapter on command line switches for the compiler and figure out which ones they want and then type them in. So we decided, we had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless R&D and documentation hours into creating these switches. We go out and we do research and we find out nobody's using them. Nobody is reading the manual. Programmers don't want to read a manual. They just want to get the result that they're after. So we came up with a design solution. And this was, again, thinking outside the job description, because this was a technical writing group at the time, saying our manual's not working. It's not solving the problem. So here's a graphical user interface where the programmer can simply check off the features, the controls that they want. It's going to build the command line for them. And if they need a few little hints, there's the embedded information right there as well. So we solved the problem. Features are not used because we put a distance between the result that they're trying to achieve and where they start in terms of their knowledge of the product and knowledge of the way to operate the product. We think we're solving the problem when we create an information bridge that gets them from one side of the chasm to the other, right? That, they can call support, or they can search for it in the UI, or they can search for it in the external documentation. We give them all the information that they need to get the result that they're after. Why aren't they using it? There used to be the term RTFM, right? Read the friendly manual in order to get the result that you want. That was the attitude that we often had back in those days. But what UX design is all about is closing the chasm, not requiring that information bridge as much as possible, and bringing the result as close to the user, the workflow to achieve the result as close to the user and as simple as possible. That's our job. So if we're going to dispel this myth that our product's features are used, we need to show empathy to the developers and to the product managers. We need to go over to them and we say, I just was out doing this user research. I've done several visits so far, and I found out that this great feature that you built and spent all this time writing code for, elegant code, no one knows it's there. No one's using it. I feel so sorry for you that you wasted all your time and effort creating this feature. Okay, but I have a solution for you. Here's a prototype of how we could surface this feature in the product so that people can find it and use it and be delighted by it. So just let's do a little UX work here, and we can really get this feature used. The other way to do it, and here's a challenge for all of you, invent a new design framework. Okay, we've had for a lot of products for many years this model, right? This design framework where we have menus, and in the menus there are submenus, and then there are dialog boxes that come up, and then there are switches, and there are panels, and there are things on the bottom, there's things on the top, there's things on the side, there's things everywhere. Functions are all around the object that we want to focus on, which is the image in this case, right? So how can we come up with a new design framework in which the functionality to manipulate the object that the customer cares about is directly embedded into the product, into the object of focus itself. I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm working on it, and I think I have some ideas. I think you should work on it too. Myth number 4, your product is inherently complex. Have you ever heard this? At HP, I used to hear this a lot because we built products for scientists and engineers, right? And I would give workshops when I was with the corporate engineering group, and I'd say, you know, we really need to simplify this product. And somebody would always stand up and they'd say, you know, our division designs oscilloscopes or liquid chromatographs, and our products, the technology is inherently complex. The use of that technology is inherently complex. Not only that, but our users are scientists and engineers, and they would be offended if we were to make this any easier to use. They really enjoy the complexity. I even had a support manager once go to me and says, hey, wait a minute, you know, we don't want to make these products too easy to use because we make a lot of money selling support contracts. So complexity was a source of income. Okay. What I would tell these people when they stood up and said that is, no, your product isn't inherently complex. It's just the technology is immature. And this became very clear when we did a customer research visit. Again, it was with a test and measurement group. And they said, yeah, our oscilloscope's complex, but it's not rocket science, for God's sake. So we go out and have the opportunity to visit Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of the key rocket science places in the world where we actually got to observe rocket sciences. And the rocket scientist said, you know what? I don't have time to learn how to use these products anymore. They really need to be easier to use and require less time for me to read manuals and stuff just to get the results that I'm after. So again, by going out and doing the research, you dispel the user mindset, you dispel the myth of inherent complexity, and hopefully then you can start focusing on how do I design this product so the result is within immediate reach of the user instead of requiring them to learn and to read. Okay, and if you look at the evolution of technology, you have a situation where over time, technology starts by having a large job 2 requirement on users. Job 2 is all the information that a person needs to know about the technology in order to achieve a result with it, okay? But over time, this job 2 stuff disappears from the technology. There's a layer of simplicity that goes over it. And users can start focusing more on job 1, which is why they bought the product. Job 1, if you were to ask a user, why'd you buy this product? They say, well, I bought it so I could do this. That's job 1. That's what they're trying to get to. So at the beginning of the technology being invented, it's very unruly, it's very complex, it's very raw, you know, like a little dog, you know, that like a puppy that's pulling you around instead of you walking the dog. And the user types who adopt this kind of technology, while there's still a large job 2 component, are experts. They're technologists, they're early adopters. In the case of ENIAC, which is what you see here in this little picture, they had women come in and program ENIAC. They were called human computers, very smart women. And that was as large as the user base got. Over time, though, as the technology matures and it supports more job 1 kinds of activity, then it's a little bit more mature and domesticated, honestly. And then the user types can be very different. So what happens is if you move from rare to pervasive, from early adopters to everyone, you're supporting the interaction between users and the product by using the language of results. Back in the old days, you get a VCR, you had to enter in using a bunch of cryptic buttons, the channel number that you wanted and the start time and the end time and the date that you wanted to record something on, right? This is when it was moving just through lab curiosity from exotic tool to expensive toy at this point. But then as it matured, it became a more domesticated technology. We've now moved into DVRs and cloud-based DVRs and so on, where I can just say, record Star Wars. And I don't have to know when it's on. I don't have to know what channel it's on, what network it's on, what day it's on. It's just going to record it for me. So this was an example, again, of technology evolution from complex to simplicity. So the argument that my product is inherently complex, yeah, it may start that way, but that's not the way it needs to end up. But unfortunately, technologists have blind spots when they assume that their technology is complex and that it's never going to get any simpler. So see if you can tell who said these, made these statements, right? These are very technically savvy people. Somebody said computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. This was a breakthrough. And this was said by Popular Mechanics magazine, forecasting the relentless march of science in 1949. Here's another one. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. That was actually Western Union, the telegraph company. They must have seen the telephone as a threat or just an expensive toy. And they actually had the opportunity to acquire the Bell telephone patent for the telephone, turned it down. I have traveled the length and breadth of this country and talked to the best people, and I can assure you that data processing is a fad that won't last out the year. This was an editor at Prentice Hall, the publisher, turning down a book on data processing because, you know, next year, by the time we get the book out, it's not even going to be around anymore. There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. Who said that? Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft in 2007. I think he miscalculated the market penetration of that simplified device. And then finally, I predict that the internet will go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. This was the founder of 3Com, a network company, communication company, surprisingly, back in 1995. What happened to 3Com? They were bought by HP and absorbed into the company. So might have misstepped on that one too. So how do you dispel this myth of inherent complexity? Ask, what would Alexa do? Okay. If your product had an Alexa interface and could respond to every user's command, it would be speaking the language of results. For Word, if it had an Alexa interface, I could say, when I start typing this text, it should appear at the top of the page. Okay. That's what I want it to do. I can't find a way to make it do that in all the documentation and all the menu items and all the different controls that it offers me. Can't figure it out. Adobe, delete the background of this image and save it as a file with a file size of under a megabyte. That's the result that I want. But instead of just being able to tell Adobe that, I have to go through all these menus and all these different controls in order to try to figure it out, and probably have to go watch a few videos and go out on the internet and try to search for how to make that happen. So I want results, but Microsoft and Adobe's perspective is that I am not worthy to have these results, right? I haven't invested the time to master the product and understand all its capabilities and read all the manuals. So what I would just ask Adobe and Microsoft to do is just look at your product, and for every single function there, what is the result that I'm trying to achieve with that function? Do I really need to understand the underlying technology and terminology to get this result? And can these functions be expressed in terms of results instead of some cryptic technology that you guys may understand, but I don't get it, and I don't want to get it? So I'm not suggesting with this that your product have a voice interface, but what I'm saying is that if you imagine that it did, it will reveal the minimum information required to achieve a result. It will allow the user to express their results in natural language. And those bits of information that they express in that command are ideally the only information that the product would require of them. Another way to dispel this myth, field research. Am I repeating myself? Yes, I am repeating myself. In my book, I have a section in there called The Solution to Everything. And I do believe that field research is the solution to everything. It's where you go and you understand the reality of the user's world. It's where you break through the myths of the office and start to see real people trying to do real things. And you start to see that simplicity is really the greatest innovation that you can come up with. And if you don't tirelessly pursue it, some startup competitor is going to come along and you're going to find yourself out of business. They're going to simplify things. Myth number 5, UX is a separate process owned by a separate team. I actually put out a brief post on LinkedIn once, which listed these 7 myths, and it didn't go into any detail. It had like one sentence for each of them. And I got a lot of people calling BS on me for this one. They said, wait a minute. UX is a profession. We have a skill set that no one else has, and stay off of our turf, right? Don't ever try to tell us that UX is actually shared by someone else besides our user experience team, right? I tend to get the most pushback from designers actually when I say this. But think of it. If your SaaS application is offline, isn't that a UX issue? If the paper jams in your printer, is that not a UX issue? If your order processing process is complex and lengthy, isn't that a UX issue? If your support staff can't resolve user problems, isn't that a UX issue too? If your warranty or return policy is rigid and perceived as unfair, isn't that a user experience issue? If your cost of ownership is out of line with your competitors, isn't that a UX issue? If your sales process nickel and dimes customers for everything, isn't that a UX issue? If your marketing uses dark patterns that deceive customers, isn't that also a UX issue? So that's what I mean when I say everybody owns a bit of this. Back around the year 2000, there was this concept called total customer experience. And it looked at the entire life cycle of ownership of a particular product. And it started with purchase milestones. I'm choosing which product to buy. I'm going to then decide and acquire it. And then I'm going to replace it eventually. And maybe I'll choose the same product. Maybe I haven't had a good experience. I'll choose something else. And then within that time frame, that life cycle, that there are these use milestones. You got to set it up. You got to achieve results with it. Sometimes you have to learn more about it. What can it do? What can I do with it? Sometimes you have to solve problems that are having, like the error messages on my printer. And sometimes you have to maintain it as well. So this is a broader view of UX. And it's the one that I'm trying to get companies to adopt again. Okay. Because if you have this total customer experience mindset and approach, it breaks down all the functional silos that you have within your company. Everyone retains their skill set and their defined contributions, but they have the common goal of trying to make the user experience for the areas that they are responsible for as simple as and direct as possible. It breaks through the not invented here syndrome because, you can come up with a UX innovation, and I've done this and gotten caught by this, but because your colleagues, your product managers, your developers, your whomever didn't participate in the invention of that, they're not going to support it. And then you tend to run into the corporate immune system. Okay. You're trying to score a goal for your users, but there are all of these colleagues of yours in the company that are blocking you and trying to prevent you from actually achieving that goal and making the user experience across the entire life cycle better. Okay. So failure to make UX everybody's job is what generates this corporate immune system. I made the mistake once of coming up with an innovation and working by myself and then getting a small team involved and then getting the executive leadership team to buy into it before I ever involved the product manager, the developer, or the product owner. And they were just so irate because I had done this. I came out as this hero of the company, right? This new guy had come in and solved this huge problem. They had been saying the same thing for years. And yet, for some reason, the timing was right when I said it. And of course, I showed them a prototype too, which helped. But they were very angry with me. And it took me a long time in order to get them to come back on my side. I had to repair a lot of relationships there. Eventually, though, the ELT really applauded it. And had I done this right, I would have gone up and made this presentation of the problem, of the prototype that solved it, of the current state, of the future state, and done it with the product manager and the product owner and the developer, so that we were all supporting each other. And the executive leadership team could then see that the entire organization thought this was a good idea. So how do you dispel this myth? Cross-functional collaboration is key. You got to have everybody engaged with you in trying to make innovation and UX innovation happen. So you have to go out and do research, but it's a different kind of research now. It's a research on the people that you work with and the people that you don't work with inside the company. You need to go on a listening tour. You need to sit down with them and say, hey, what keeps you up at night? What's your opinion of the user experience right now? How does the user experience affect your job? Is there a way that you think that we could collaborate on the user experience? I love the ideas that you give me. I'm going to go off and I'm going to think about it. I'm going to build some prototypes, early prototypes, and I'm going to get back with you. And then maybe you can work with me to refine this idea into something better. So you want to go out to development, product management, product owners, QA, support, sales, marketing, content developers, professional services, trainers, and the executive leadership team. Research what their pain points are, just like you would for a user, what their big unmet needs are, just like you would for a user, and then use that information to get them all to collaborate with you on making UX happen. That's how you change culture, okay? By dispelling this myth, of educating them, influencing them, inspiring them, engaging them in design. That's what I mean by the idea that UX is everybody's job, okay? You need to influence and inspire your teammates just as much as you do a focus as you put on design work, okay? It's just as important, because you have this mindset that you need to spread throughout the company. You have these techniques of doing user experience analysis and research that you need to get others to adopt so they can apply it to their particular part of the total customer experience lifecycle, okay? So you do this by research. You invite all these people to come with you on user research. You invite them to come into usability tests and on-site observational research and virtual research over Zoom or whatever it might be, unmoderated research. You videotape customers telling you what needs to be done, and then you share those videos with people. It can be very compelling. So great design is not enough, and that's why I wrote this book, Navigating the Politics of UX. UX innovations fail due to politics more than they do poor design. And so this book has a lot of stories and strategies from my 40 years in UX on how to different kinds of issues and challenges that come up, and opportunities as well, and how to address them. Okay, because politics is nothing more than people. It doesn't have to be a dirty word. Okay, myth number 6, feature parity is a winning product strategy. Here is the Xerox 8200 copier. It was designed as an innovative product with a whole bunch of new copying features, but they didn't pay attention to the UX. And it was the first failure in Xerox history. The industrial human factors guy said, the reason it failed was the strategy was to expand the use of collating, charging, reducing, and features, but people had to wade through buttons and visual noise and manuals for all the features, including the most frequently used one, which is to copy a page or two. And customers abandoned Xerox for simpler machines, and their market share plummeted. Over time, features get overgrown, right? And sometimes you can have the most feature-rich project and it's still going to fail. Like WordPerfect, way back, was the #1 word processor at the time. It got replaced by Microsoft Word. It didn't have the same number of features, at least initially, but it did have a better user interface, and it expanded its market share based on usability. VisiCalc the same way, replaced by Microsoft Excel. Then there's product evolution. So this is the way products evolve, right? They go up and up and up, and eventually they become much more complex. They move from simplicity to complexity, but they have more features and power, okay? Sometimes they go directly that way. You can reduce the complexity by reducing the features in the product, but that can be a problem too. because sometimes the full feature product doesn't have the features that a user wants. And if they're searching for them and they're not there, that's a problem. You can simplify it by incremental improvements, right? That's what we mostly do, right? We make incremental advances in security, but it's still effort exceeds value until we do a lot of those. So what we want to get to, again, is that new design paradigm of disruptive simplicity where we retain all the features and power and capability, but dramatically reduce the complexity. How do you do this? By doing UX competitive report cards. Product managers do report cards on features. You want to do a report card on usability. So you look at visual design, findability, navigation, teacher tools, and this was education, right? Progress and performance, mobility, learner engagement, data and reporting, and so on. And you rate all the different products in comparison to yours in terms of usability. Then you focus on, three key areas that you can improve on, like visual design, findability, engagement, and so on. So how do you dispel this myth? You do it by prototyping, creating prototyping. So you show and not tell. So here's the old user interface for this education technology application that I had. So I built a prototype, looked like this, looks a lot better. This was doing after that user research. It was more in line with the customers were trying to achieve. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see I put in the competitor's logo, right? Oh my God, look what this competitor is doing. They're so much better than us. We better get busy. And then you just gradually replace it with Edmentum's logo. And you say, no, wait, relax. There's still time, but we really need to get started on this approach. So I don't have much time here to deal with Agile. My only thing that I'd like to say about this is that, as others have said, if you're designing an entirely new product, an entirely new innovation, trying to break that up into 2-week sprints from the beginning, and then hoping that all these pieces fit together can really result in an inconsistent design and a poor user experience because you don't have the whole picture at the start. And that's just a weighted development time. Final one, you design products. Of course you design products, right? But there's a missing component in your design. You come up with this architecture for your product, but what about the user component? Because by itself, your product can't do anything. It just sits there. It requires the user, the operator, to understand how to click the right buttons and pull the right menu items and do the right things in order to get the results that this thing is trying to achieve. So what you're designing is not a product, but it's a results system. It's a system for achieving the results that you promise the users, right? They hope to have a straight road to where you're going, but we often put all kinds of detours and wrong ways and all kinds of obstacles in their way. So I'm going to skip this because I'm running out of time and you all know what an experience is. But here's the assignment problem, right? I wrote this book, 700-page book on how to install peripherals, had all kinds of complex words in it. I then developed a prototype that showed how this process could be automated so that the user could just answer a couple of questions and the prototype would be connected. Okay. So what you're dealing with here is a critical choice. You can write a manual. And what a manual is instructions for the human mind. It's code for the human mind. Execute this procedure, right? Or you can choose to write the code and install it in the product rather than make the user responsible for that. And whenever you fail to assign a function to a product, by default, you're assigning that function to the human being. And those are interchangeable. You can take what is currently a manual and make it a functionality and simplify the user interface that way. So, to conclude, the moral of the myths: UX innovation is a mindset that must infuse your corporate culture. And for it to succeed, you've got to help others be successful. That should be your total focus. There's this Entrepreneur's 10 Commandments. You should go out and see it. It is developed by Gifford Pinchot III, and it'll help you do that. So never stop asking what's next. And I thank you for your time and your attention. And I'm done.
Thanks, John. Wonderful. I think we have a lot to thank you for. Not the least, the fact that we can add a computer to our network without any
Yes, right.
major overhead. I remember having to do it with disks and floppy disks and other things
It
like that.
wasn't easy. No, it was not. Yeah.
No, it was terrible. I think it's really important that people know where all this stuff comes from. And, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And oh, you've disappeared.